The stagecoach rattled into San Angelo, Texas on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying Emma Everett and the last threads of hope she had left, though even those were frayed beyond recognition. She stepped down onto the dusty street with her single carpet bag, her black morning dress, drawing stares from the locals who lounged in the shade of the storefronts. Emma kept her eyes down, her bonnet shielding her face from both the merciless sun and the curious gazes. She had learned in her 24 years that people rarely looked at you with kindness, only with calculations about what they could take from you. The stage driver handed down her bag without a word, and Emma clutched it to her chest like it contained something precious. It did not. Just a few changes of clothes, a Bible she no longer opened, and a small daguerreotype of parents she barely remembered. Everything else had been stripped away by circumstance, by betrayal, by the cold indifference of a world that seemed designed to break women like her. San Angelo sprawled before her in shades of brown and beige, a frontier town perched near the confluence of rivers, where cattlemen and soldiers and merchants carved out their fortunes from an unforgiving land. Emma had come because she had nowhere else to go. Her cousin Martha had written 6 months ago, offering a place to stay while Emma recovered from her losses. Martha had not written since, but Emma had sold everything she owned for the stage fare, and there was no turning back now. She walked toward the address Martha had provided, her boots stirring up small clouds of dust with each step. The heat pressed down on her like a physical weight, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the heavy black fabric. Women in lighter calico dresses passed her on the wooden sidewalk, their faces shaded by parasols, and Emma felt their judgment like needles against her skin. The house sat at the edge of town, a small structure with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Emma knocked 3 times before a woman answered, but it was not Martha. This woman was younger, perhaps 19, with suspicious eyes and a baby on her hip. "Martha Whitley does not live here anymore," the woman said before Emma could speak. "She moved to Fort Worth 2 months back, married a tinker." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She swayed slightly, her vision tunneling. "Are you certain?" "I am her cousin. She told me I could stay here." The woman's expression softened fractionally, but not much. "I'm sorry for your troubles, but we bought this house from the bank. Martha left no forwarding address. Try the general store. Someone there might know more." The door closed firmly, leaving Emma standing alone on the porch. For a long moment she could not move, could not think. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and she gripped the porch railing to steady herself. She had exactly $3 left in her purse. $3 in a strange town with no prospects and no family. This was how goodness died, she thought distantly. Not in one terrible moment, but in 1,000 small cruelties that wore you down until you were hollow. Emma walked back toward the center of town, her mind racing through impossible calculations. $3 might buy her a week at a boarding house if she ate sparingly. After that, she would need work, and work for respectable women in frontier towns was scarce and poorly paid. The alternatives were unthinkable, though she had already been approached twice in her life by men who assumed a woman alone was a woman available. The general store was crowded with afternoon shoppers, and Emma waited near the back, trying to make herself invisible. When the clerk finally acknowledged her, she asked about Martha Whitley, but he only shook his head. No one in the store recognized the name. Emma's last thread of hope snapped. She left the store and stood on the sidewalk, paralyzed by indecision. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful, if you had the heart to notice beauty. Emma did not. "You look lost, miss." The voice came from behind her, deep and rough like gravel rolling down a mountainside. Emma turned and found herself looking up at the largest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the lowering sun. His hair was dark brown and fell past his collar, tied back loosely with a leather cord. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, pale blue and startlingly clear, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. He wore buckskin pants and a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. A knife hung at his belt, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had never feared much in his life. Emma took an instinctive step backward. "I'm fine, thank you." "You do not look fine." His gaze moved to her carpet bag, then back to her face. "You just came in on the stage, looking for someone? That is none of your concern." Emma's voice came out sharper than she intended, defensive. She had learned to be suspicious of men who offered help. They always wanted something in return. The man held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy now. I am not trying to cause you trouble. Name is Fletcher Larson. I have a place up in the mountains north of town. Come into San Angelo every few weeks for supplies." He paused, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. "You look like you could use a meal and maybe some water. It is hot enough to drop a horse today." Emma's throat was indeed parched, and she had not eaten since early morning, but she shook her head firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but I must decline." "Suit yourself." Fletcher did not seem offended. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of farewell and walked past her toward a large bay horse tied to the hitching post. Emma watched him load supplies into his saddlebags with efficient movements, her pride warring with her desperation. She had $3, no prospects, nowhere to sleep tonight. "Mr. Larson," she heard herself say, and hated the tremor in her voice. He turned back, his expression neutral. "Yes, madam? I find myself in difficult circumstances. My cousin who was to provide accommodation has moved away. I have very little money and know no one in this town." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "I am seeking respectable employment. If you know of any opportunities, I would be grateful for the information." Fletcher studied her for a long moment, and Emma forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. She would not beg, but she would swallow her pride enough to ask for help. There was a difference. "What kind of work can you do?" he asked finally. "I can cook, clean, sew, manage a household. I can read and write and do figures. I'm not afraid of hard work." Emma lifted her chin. "I'm respectable and honest." "I believe you." Something in his tone made her think he actually did. "Problem is, San Angelo does not have much call for household help. Most families manage on their own, and the few that hire usually want someone they know. The saloons are always hiring, but I'm guessing that is not what you are looking for." Emma's face burned. "No, it is not." Fletcher scratched his jaw thoughtfully. "I might have an idea, but you would have to trust me for a few hours. I need to finish my business in town first. Can you wait at the hotel restaurant? I will buy you supper and we can talk." Every instinct Emma possessed screamed at her to refuse. She knew nothing about this man except that he was enormous and armed and lived alone in the mountains. The setup for a dozen tragedies she had heard whispered about in boarding houses and church socials. But her stomach was empty. Her head was beginning to ache from the heat, and she could think of no better options. "Very well," she said quietly. "But I will wait in the hotel lobby, not the restaurant, in full view of others." Fletcher nodded as if he had expected nothing less. "Fair enough. Give me 2 hours." He swung up onto his horse with surprising grace for a man his size. "Order whatever you want to eat and put it on my account. Tell them Fletcher Larson sent you." He rode off before Emma could respond, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk once more. She watched him disappear around a corner, then looked up at the hotel sign. The San Angelo Hotel promised clean rooms and good food. Emma had never felt less deserving of either. But she climbed the steps to the lobby and approached the desk clerk with as much dignity as she could muster. "Mr. Fletcher Larson said I should order a meal and charge it to his account." The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Fletcher Larson, you say? The mountain man?" "Yes, sir." "And what business do you have with Fletcher?" Emma felt her cheeks burn again. "That is between Mr. Larson and myself. If his credit is not good here, I will take my business elsewhere." The clerk's expression shifted slightly, something like grudging respect flickering across his face. "His credit is fine. Fletcher is one of the most honest men I know. You can eat in the dining room if you like." Emma ordered soup and bread, afraid to ask for more despite Fletcher's instructions. She sat at a table near the window where she could watch the street and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The soup was thick and hot and delicious, the bread fresh enough that steam rose when she broke it open. Emma ate slowly, making it last, and wondered when she had last felt truly safe. Not in years, maybe not ever. Her father had died when she was 8, crushed under a wagon wheel in a freak accident. Her mother had remarried within 6 months to a man who looked at Emma in ways that made her skin crawl. She had endured 3 years under his roof before her mother died of fever, and then Emma had been sent to live with an aunt in Missouri who resented every morsel of food Emma consumed. At 16, she had taken a position as a domestic servant in a wealthy household, grateful to be independent at last. That had lasted 4 years until the master of the house began making advances. When Emma refused him, he told his wife that Emma had been stealing. She was dismissed without references and barely escaped criminal charges. The next position ended similarly, though that time the man's son had been the aggressor. After that, Emma had been desperate enough to accept a proposal from a man she barely knew, a shopkeeper who seemed kind and stable. He had been neither. The marriage lasted 8 months before he gambled away his business and disappeared in the night, leaving Emma with his debts and a landlord who wanted immediate payment. She had sold everything, paid what she could, and fled west to San Angelo on the promise of sanctuary with a cousin who was no longer there. And now here she sat, eating soup bought by a stranger and trying not to calculate how many more disappointments she could survive before something in her broke permanently. The 2 hours passed slowly. Emma nursed a cup of coffee and watched the shadows lengthen outside. When Fletcher finally appeared in the dining room doorway, she felt an odd mix of relief and anxiety. He had cleaned up somewhat, his hair damp as if he had dunked his head in a trough, his shirt changed to a cleaner one. He sat down across from her with a nod of greeting. "Get enough to eat?" "Yes, thank you. It was very generous." "Nothing generous about it. Cannot have a conversation with someone who is hungry and uncomfortable." Fletcher waved over the server and ordered his own meal, then turned his attention back to Emma. "So here is what I am thinking. I live up in the mountains about 3 hours north of here. It is good land, near a creek with plenty of game and timber. I do all right for myself, hunting and trapping, selling pelts and meat to the army and to merchants in town." Emma nodded slowly, unsure where this was leading. "But living alone gets to be a challenge," Fletcher continued, "especially in winter. I spend half my time just keeping up with the basic necessities, cooking and cleaning and mending, when I would rather be working. I have thought about hiring someone to help manage the household side of things, but it is hard to find someone trustworthy, and most folks do not want to live that far from town." Understanding began to dawn. "You are offering me a position. I am considering it. I need someone who can cook decent meals, keep the cabin clean, mend clothes, maybe help with preserving food and such. In exchange, I would provide room and board and wages, $20 a month to start, more if things work out." $20 was more than Emma had made in any previous position. It was also completely improper. "Mr. Larson, you understand that an unmarried woman cannot live alone with an unmarried man without severe damage to her reputation." "I understand that, yes." Fletcher leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Which is why I am going to be straight with you. What I am proposing is not entirely proper by conventional standards, but you are in a difficult situation, and I am offering a practical solution. I give you my word that I will treat you with complete respect. You will have your own room with a door that locks. I will not make advances or expect anything beyond the work we agree on. If at any point you are uncomfortable or want to leave, I will bring you back to town myself, no questions asked." Emma studied his face, searching for deception. She had become good at spotting lies, the tiny tells that gave men away when they promised things they had no intention of delivering. But Fletcher's gaze was steady and direct, and there was something fundamentally solid about him, like bedrock under shallow soil. "Why would you make this offer to a complete stranger?" she asked. "Because you need help, and I am in a position to provide it. Because I have been in tight spots myself, and remember what it feels like. And because you struck me as honest, which is rarer than you might think." He paused. "Also, I am good at reading people, and my gut says you are trustworthy. I learned to trust my gut a long time ago." Emma wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to believe that there were still good people in the world, people who helped others without expecting cruelty in return. But her faith in such things had been ground down to nothing. "I need time to think," she said finally. "That is fair. But I plan to head back up the mountain at first light tomorrow. If you want to take the job, meet me at the livery stable at dawn." If you do not show, I will understand, and there will be no hard feelings. Fletcher's meal arrived, and he picked up his fork. Either way, you can stay at the hotel tonight on my account. Room and meals. That will give you a safe place to think things through. I cannot accept that much charity. It is not charity. Consider it an advance on your wages if you take the job. If you do not, consider it payment for listening to an old mountain man ramble. He said it lightly, though Emma suspected he was not that old. Perhaps 30, no more than 32. She should refuse. She should find some other option, some path that did not require her to gamble everything on the word of a stranger. But as she sat there in the dimming light, watching Fletcher eat his meal with unselfconscious efficiency, Emma could not think of a single alternative that was not worse. "I will consider your offer," she said at last. "That is all I ask." Fletcher finished his meal in silence, then stood and dropped some coins on the table. "Get a good night's rest. Dawn comes early." He left without further comment, and Emma sat alone at the table, her mind churning. The server brought her a room key and directed her upstairs. The room was small but clean, with a real bed and fresh linens. Emma locked the door behind her and sat on the edge of the mattress, her hands folded in her lap. She should be planning, weighing options, making rational decisions. Instead, she found herself crying for the first time in months, great silent sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her lost parents and her lost youth and her lost faith in a world that had shown her so little mercy. She cried until she was empty, and then she lay down fully clothed and fell into exhausted sleep. When she woke, the sky outside her window was still dark, but she could see the first pale hints of dawn on the horizon. Emma washed her face in the basin, changed into a fresh dress that was still black but less travel-worn, and repacked her carpet bag. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and saw a woman who had been beaten down but not quite broken. She could stay in San Angelo and hope for some miracle, or she could take a chance on a mountain man who had shown her more kindness in 3 hours than she had experienced in 3 years. Emma picked up her bag and walked downstairs. The hotel lobby was empty except for the night clerk dozing at his post. She slipped out the front door into the cool pre-dawn air and made her way to the livery stable. Fletcher was already there, saddling his bay horse by lantern light. He looked up when she approached, and something like relief crossed his face. "You came," he said simply. "I came." Emma set down her bag. "I accept your offer, Mr. Larson, with the understanding that if the arrangement does not suit either of us, it can be ended." "Agreed." Fletcher finished with his horse and turned to a second animal, a sturdy-looking mule. "You can ride, I hope?" "Not well, but I can manage. This is Rosie. She is gentle and knows the trail. Just sit steady and let her follow my horse." Fletcher secured Emma's bag to the mule's pack saddle, then helped Emma mount with a steadying hand on her elbow. His touch was brief and impersonal, and Emma felt some of her tension ease. They rode out of San Angelo as the sun broke over the eastern horizon, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The town fell away behind them, and they headed north into rolling hill country that gradually gave way to steeper terrain. Fletcher set an easy pace, and the mule plodded along steadily beneath Emma. The land was beautiful in a harsh way, all rock and scrub and scattered oak trees. They crossed dry creek beds and climbed ridges that offered sweeping views of the valleys below. Fletcher pointed out landmarks as they went, explaining the terrain with the easy knowledge of someone who had spent years learning every detail. "That peak to the northwest is where I trap in winter," he said, gesturing toward a distant summit. "The creek that runs past my place flows year-round, so there's always water. Deer come down from the high country to drink at dawn and dusk. There's a family of black bears in the canyon to the east, but they keep to themselves if you do not bother them." Emma listened, storing away the information. She had lived her whole life in towns and cities, and this wilderness felt both alien and oddly compelling. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of the horse's hooves and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. They stopped at midday beside a spring where water bubbled up from between rocks. Fletcher unpacked bread and cheese and dried apples, and they ate in companionable silence. Emma noticed that he moved with deliberate care around her, always maintaining a respectful distance, never crowding her space. It was such a small thing, but it mattered. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they prepared to continue. Go ahead. Why do you live alone up here? It seems like a lonely life. Fletcher was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. I suppose it is sometimes. But I grew up in these mountains, son of a trapper. Lost my parents to cholera when I was 17. Tried living in towns after that, even worked as a ranch hand for a few years. But I never fit in well with people. Too much noise, too many rules, too much meanness. He looked at her then, and his expression was surprisingly open. Mountains are hard but honest. They do not lie to you or pretend to be something they are not. I appreciate that. Emma understood more than he probably realized. I have found that people can be very dishonest indeed. You have had a hard time of it, Fletcher said, and it was not a question. Yes. Emma did not elaborate, and he did not press. They reached Fletcher's cabin in late afternoon, and Emma's first sight of it eased something in her chest she had not known was tight. It was a solid structure built of logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pines, with the creek Fletcher had mentioned running nearby. Chickens pecked in a small enclosure beside the cabin, and a well-maintained garden showed neat rows of vegetables. It is not fancy, Fletcher said as he dismounted, but it is sound. Roof does not leak, and the walls keep out the wind in winter. It is lovely, Emma said, and meant it. There was something deeply appealing about the place, a sense of order and care that spoke well of the man who maintained it. Fletcher helped her down from the mule, then led both animals to a small barn behind the cabin. Emma followed with her bag, looking around with growing curiosity. Everything was well kept without being fussy, practical without being crude. Fletcher clearly took pride in his home. Inside, the cabin was divided into 3 rooms. The main area served as kitchen and living space, with a large fireplace and a sturdy table. A door to the left led to what Fletcher explained was his bedroom. A door to the right opened onto a smaller room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a wooden chest. "This will be your room," Fletcher said. "I built it a few years back thinking I might need extra space. Never got around to using it much." He showed her the lock on the inside of the door, a simple but effective bolt. "I meant what I said about your privacy. This is your space." Emma set down her bag and looked around the little room. It was plain but clean, with a window that looked out toward the creek. After months of uncertainty and fear, it felt like a sanctuary. "Thank you," she said softly. Fletcher nodded and backed toward the door. "Take some time to settle in. I will get started on supper. We can talk about the work arrangements over the meal." He left her alone, and Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, stuffed with what felt like pine needles and dried grass. Through the open window she could hear the burble of the creek and the whisper of wind through the pines. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Emma felt the faintest stirring of something that might have been hope. Over the next days, Emma settled into a routine that was both strange and oddly comfortable. Fletcher had been accurate about his needs. The cabin required constant maintenance, and he'd been managing it all himself with varying degrees of success. Emma took over the cooking, the cleaning, the mending, and the 100 other small tasks that made a house a home. She discovered that Fletcher was an easy person to work for. He was tidy by nature and cleaned up after himself without being asked. He never complained about meals, though she suspected he would have eaten just about anything without comment. He worked hard from dawn to dusk, hunting, tending the garden, repairing equipment, and preparing for the coming winter. But it was the small kindnesses that caught Emma off guard. On her second morning, she woke to find that Fletcher had already drawn water from the well and left a bucket by her door so she could wash without having to walk down to the creek. When she mentioned that the light in the main room was dim for sewing, he built a clever reflector from a piece of polished tin that caught the sunlight and directed it where she needed it. When a rainstorm blew through and she admitted to being nervous about thunder, he made no joke at her expense, but simply sat by the fire whittling while she worked, his calm presence steadying her nerves. He asked her opinion on things. What vegetables should they focus on harvesting first? Did she think the chickens needed a larger enclosure? Would it be better to smoke or salt the venison he had brought down that morning? He listened when she answered and often followed her suggestions, treating her insights as valuable rather than dismissing her as a mere housekeeper. It was disorienting. Emma kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Fletcher to reveal himself as cruel or demanding or lecherous. But days turned into weeks, and he remained exactly what he appeared to be, a quiet, honest man who did his work and treated her with unwavering respect. She began to relax degree by degree. The tight knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for years started to loosen. She slept better. She found herself humming while she worked. Once she even laughed at a joke Fletcher made about a particularly stubborn mule, and the sound of her own laughter startled her. Fletcher noticed, though he said nothing. But Emma sometimes caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Not predatory, not calculating. Something softer, something that made her heart beat a little faster. One evening in early September, they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cooling as summer began its slow transition to autumn, and the light had that particular golden quality that made everything look burnished. "You seem easier than when you first arrived," Fletcher said quietly. "Less like you were waiting for something bad to happen." Emma considered denying it, then decided there was no point. "I suppose I am. You have been very kind, Mr. Larson." "Fletcher, we have been living under the same roof for a month now. I think we can dispense with the formalities." "Fletcher, then." Emma paused. "And you may call me Emma, if you like." "Emma." He said her name carefully, as if testing the weight of it. "It suits you." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable now in a way that had seemed impossible a few weeks earlier. Finally, Emma found the courage to ask the question that had been building in her mind. "Fletcher, why are you so kind? I do not mean to sound ungrateful, but I have not met many men like you. Most would have expected something in return for their generosity by now." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, his gaze on the darkening sky. "My mother was a good woman," he said at last. "Worked hard her whole life, raised me right, never had much but made the best of what she had. When she got sick, not a single person in the settlement where we lived offered to help. They all had excuses. Too busy, too poor, too worried about catching whatever she had. She died in pain because no one would spare even an hour to sit with her while I went for medicine." His jaw tightened, and Emma saw old anger flickering in his eyes. "I was 17 and helpless, and I learned that most people will not lift a finger for you if there is no benefit to them. So I decided that I would not be like that. If I saw someone who needed help and I could provide it, I would. Not for reward or recognition, just because it was the right thing to do." Emma felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Long time ago now." Fletcher glanced at her and his expression softened. "But I remember what it feels like to be desperate and alone. I saw that same look on your face when you stepped off the stage in San Angelo. Figured the least I could do was offer a hand up." "You have done far more than that." Emma's voice came out husky. "You have treated me with more respect and kindness in 1 month than I received in years before that. I want you to know that it matters. It means something." Fletcher looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them in the fading light. Something fragile and new, like the first green shoot pushing up through hard ground. "I'm glad you decided to come here, Emma," he said quietly. "This place is better for having you in it." Emma did not trust herself to speak. She nodded and looked away, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. After a while, Fletcher stood and stretched. "I should check on the horses before full dark. Sleep well, Emma." "You too, Fletcher." She watched him walk toward the barn, his tall figure silhouetted against the last light. Something was shifting in her chest, some long, frozen place beginning to thaw. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She was beginning to trust him. More than that, she was beginning to care for him. The realization should have sent her running. Every instinct born of bitter experience screamed that this was dangerous, that letting herself feel anything would only lead to more pain. But Emma was tired of being afraid, tired of living in a world without goodness. And Fletcher was showing her goodness every single day. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Emma could remember. She and Fletcher fell into an easy partnership that went beyond the simple employer-employee relationship they had started with. They worked together on projects, talked during meals, shared the comfortable silences of people who were learning to understand each other. Fletcher taught her about the mountains, taking her on long walks where he pointed out animal tracks, edible plants, the subtle signs of changing weather. Emma discovered that she loved the wildness of this place, the sense of being connected to something larger and more enduring than human dramas. She taught him too, without really meaning to, how to make bread that rose properly, the best way to organize supplies so they were easy to find, small touches that made the cabin more comfortable, like curtains on the windows and cushions on the hard chairs. They were building something together, Emma realized, not just maintaining a household, but creating a home. The physical attraction came slowly, or perhaps it had been there all along and Emma was only now allowing herself to acknowledge it. She found her gaze lingering on the way Fletcher's muscles moved under his shirt when he chopped wood. The way his hands, so large and capable, could be surprisingly gentle when handling delicate tasks. The rare smiles that transformed his weathered face into something almost beautiful. She caught him watching her too, his eyes following her movements as she worked, a softness in his expression that made her pulse quicken. But he never pushed, never made her uncomfortable. He maintained the respectful distance they had established, even as the air between them grew increasingly charged. It was Emma who finally broke the unspoken barrier. They had been working together to harvest apples from a small orchard near the cabin. Fletcher climbed the trees to shake the branches while Emma gathered the fallen fruit in baskets. The afternoon was warm and bright, and Emma had taken off her bonnet to feel the sun on her face. "That is the last of them," Fletcher called from his perch in the highest tree. He swung down from branch to branch with the ease of long practice, then dropped the final few feet to the ground and stumbled, his foot catching on an exposed root. Emma reacted without thinking, reaching out to steady him. Fletcher caught himself against her, his hands gripping her shoulders for balance. They were suddenly very close, close enough that Emma could see the flecks of darker blue in his pale eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Sorry," Fletcher said, but he did not immediately step back. "Clumsy of me." "You are not clumsy," Emma's voice came out breathless. "I have seen you move through these mountains like you are part of them. Maybe I'm just distracted." "By what?" Fletcher's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "By you." Emma's heart was pounding so hard, she was certain he must be able to hear it. Every rational thought told her to step away, to maintain the safe distance they had preserved. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of denying herself even the possibility of happiness. "Fletcher," she whispered, "what are we doing?" "I do not know." His hands were still on her shoulders, warm and steady. "I know what I want to do, but I gave you my word that I would not push for more than you were ready to give." "What if I am ready?" The words came out before Emma could stop them. "What if I want more?" Fletcher's expression shifted, hope and desire and uncertainty all mixing together. "Emma, I do not want you to feel pressured. You work for me, and that creates a power imbalance. I would never want to take advantage." "You are not taking advantage if I am asking." Emma lifted her hands and rested them on his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fabric. "I am asking, Fletcher, unless you do not want this." "Not want it?" Fletcher gave a short, breathless laugh. "I have been half in love with you since the day you told the hotel clerk to mind his own business. But I need you to be sure. I need to know this is what you truly want and not just something you feel obligated to do." "I am sure." And Emma was. For the first time in her life, she was choosing something purely for herself without calculation or fear. "I want this. I want you." Fletcher exhaled slowly, and then he was kissing her, his lips gentle against hers despite his obvious restraint. Emma melted into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, his hair. The kiss deepened, and Emma felt something inside her break open, all the walls she had built to protect herself crumbling at last. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I will treat you right, Emma. I swear it. I will never hurt you or betray you or make you regret this." "I know." And she did know, with a certainty that went bone deep. "I trust you." They stood there in the orchard for a long time, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the apple trees. Emma felt something she had thought was lost forever. Faith in goodness. Faith that there were people in the world who kept their promises. Faith that she deserved to be loved. And Fletcher showed her that love every single day. Their courtship, if it could be called that, was unconventional by any standard. They already lived together, already knew each other's rhythms and habits and small quirks. But now there was an openness between them, an intimacy that went beyond the practical partnership they had built. Fletcher courted her with the resources he had. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows. He carved her a beautiful comb from deer antler. He took her to a hidden waterfall where the mist created rainbows in the sunlight, and they sat on the rocks watching the water cascade down. Emma gave what she could in return. She made his favorite meals. She mended his clothes with extra care, adding small decorative stitches that transformed utilitarian repairs into something beautiful. She left little notes for him to find, tucked into his coat pockets or under his pillow, telling him how much she appreciated him. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts. Emma told him about her difficult childhood, her failed marriage, the long series of betrayals and disappointments that had brought her to San Angelo. Fletcher listened without judgment, his hand holding hers, and when she cried, he simply pulled her close and let her grieve for all she had lost. He told her about his own struggles, the loneliness of living alone for years, the way he sometimes wondered if he had made the right choice in leaving civilization behind, the dreams he had for his land, for the life he wanted to build. "I always thought I would do this alone," he admitted one night as they sat by the fire. "Figured I was not the marrying kind. But then you showed up, and everything changed." "Changed how?" Emma asked softly. "I started imagining a future that was not just about survival. A future with someone to share it with. Children, maybe, if that is something you would want. Growing old together in this place I love." He looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "A real life, Emma, not just an existence." Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I would want that. All of it. Even the children? I know your marriage was not happy. If you do not want to risk that again, I would understand. My marriage failed because I married the wrong man for the wrong reasons. But you are not him, Fletcher. You are nothing like him." Emma reached out and cupped his face in her hand. "I would be honored to have children with you, to build a life with you, if that is truly what you want." "It is all I want," Fletcher said, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony in San Angelo, with the hotel clerk and the general store owner serving as witnesses. Emma wore a new dress of deep blue that Fletcher had insisted on buying her, and Fletcher wore his cleanest buckskins and had trimmed his hair and beard. They spoke their vows in steady voices, and when the traveling preacher pronounced them married, Emma felt as if she had finally come home. They celebrated with a meal at the hotel, and then Fletcher helped Emma onto her horse, and they rode back to the mountains, back to their cabin by the creek where chickens clucked in the yard and the garden was putting itself to bed for winter. That night, they lay together in Fletcher's bed, now their bed, and Emma marveled at the gentleness of his touch. He treated her like something precious, asking permission at every step, making sure she was comfortable and wanted to continue. When they finally came together, it was nothing like Emma's experience of marriage before. This was mutual, joyful, filled with laughter and whispered endearments, and a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, Fletcher held her close, his large hand stroking her hair, and Emma felt a peace settle over her that she had never known was possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I did not think I would ever say those words again, but I love you, Fletcher." "I love you too, Emma." His voice was rough with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Emma fell asleep in his arms, and for the first time in years, she did not have nightmares. The winter that followed was hard in the way mountain winters always are, with heavy snows and bitter cold. But the cabin was warm and well stocked, and Emma discovered that she did not mind being snowed in with Fletcher. They spent the long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply enjoying each other's company. Fletcher taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy. Emma taught him to play chess with a set she found in the general store, and they spent hours locked in strategic battles that usually ended with Fletcher conceding defeat and Emma trying not to gloat. They made love often, learning each other's bodies with growing confidence and pleasure. Emma blossomed under Fletcher's attention, her body filling out from the steady diet and security. The pinched, haunted look left her face, replaced by a glow that Fletcher said made her beautiful. "I've always been plain," Emma protested, but Fletcher shook his head firmly. "You have never been plain. You were just worn down by hardship. Now that you are happy, your true self is showing through. And you are beautiful, Emma, the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." In March, Emma realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally voiced it aloud, Fletcher's reaction made her laugh through happy tears. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down and apologized in case he had hurt her. "You did not hurt me," Emma said, still laughing. "I am pregnant, not made of glass." "I know, but I want to be careful. You are carrying something precious." Fletcher knelt down and placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Emma said softly. "We are going to be parents." Fletcher looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm going to be the best father I can be. I swear it, Emma. Our child will grow up knowing they are loved and wanted." "I know they will, because they have you as a father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Emma continued with her usual work, adjusting as her body changed. Fletcher was alternately protective and awed, constantly marveling at the swell of her belly, the first kicks that he felt under his hand. He built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Emma sewed tiny clothes and blankets. In early November, their son was born after a long but ultimately uncomplicated labor. The midwife Fletcher had brought down from a neighboring homestead declared it a textbook delivery, and Emma held her red-faced, squalling infant with a mixture of exhaustion and overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Fletcher whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "Emma, he is perfect." They named him Thomas, after Fletcher's father, Thomas Larson, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. He was healthy and loud and demanding, and Emma had never been so happy to be exhausted in her life. Fletcher threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. He walked the floor with Thomas when the baby would not sleep. He changed diapers without complaint. He sang to his son in a surprisingly pleasant baritone, old songs he remembered from his childhood. Emma watched him with Thomas and fell in love with him all over again. This man who had shown her goodness every day since they met, now extending that same goodness to their child. It was a gift beyond measure. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's adventurous spirit. He was barely walking before he wanted to follow Fletcher everywhere, and Fletcher patiently took him on short expeditions, teaching him about the mountains and the animals and the changing seasons. 2 years after Thomas came Mary, named for Emma's mother. She was a quieter baby, more observant, with her mother's dark hair and thoughtful expression. Fletcher doted on her just as much as he did on Thomas, carrying her in a sling against his chest while he did his work. Then came John, and then little Sarah. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Fletcher adding new rooms and Emma managing the increased workload with the help of her older children. It was exhausting and chaotic and wonderful. Emma sometimes stopped in the middle of her day, surrounded by the noise and mess of family life, and marveled at how far she had come. From the woman who had stepped off the stage in San Angelo with nothing but despair and $3, to this, a wife and mother in a home filled with love and laughter. Fletcher still showed her goodness every day, in the way he kissed her forehead when he passed her in the cabin, in the way he took over her chores when she was tired, in the way he listened to her opinions and treated her as an equal partner in all decisions, in the way he made sure she knew every single day that she was loved and valued and treasured. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked him one evening, years after they had married. The children were finally asleep, and they sat on the porch in the cool spring air, holding hands like they had when they were courting. "Do you ever wish you had kept your quiet, solitary life instead of taking in a desperate woman with nothing to offer?" Fletcher turned to her with an expression of such genuine surprise that Emma almost laughed. "Regret it? Emma, you are the reason my life has meaning. You and the children are everything I never knew I was missing. How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made? I just sometimes think about how much I disrupted your peace, how much work 4 children are, how much easier your life would have been without us. Easier is not the same as better." Fletcher lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Yes, my life was easier before. It was also lonely and small and limited. You expanded my world. Emma, you gave me purpose and joy and a reason to build something that will last beyond my own lifetime. You gave me everything." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her cheek. You saved me, you know. Not just by offering me that job, but by showing me that good people still exist, that I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You gave me back my faith in humanity. You saved me too, Fletcher said quietly. I did not realize how isolated I had become until you arrived, how I had convinced myself that I was fine alone because I was afraid of being hurt or disappointed. You taught me that taking risks on people is worth it, that opening your heart is worth it, even when it is scary. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the cabin came a sleepy murmur as one of the children turned over in bed. An owl hooted somewhere in the trees. The creek burbled its endless song. I love this life, Emma said softly. I love this place and these children, and most of all, I love you. Sometimes I can hardly believe it is real. It is real. Fletcher wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. And it is forever. I promise you that, Emma. This goodness, this love, this life we have built together, it is forever. Emma believed him. She had learned, slowly and painfully, to trust again, to have faith again, to believe in goodness again, all because of a mountain man who kept his promises and showed her kindness every single day. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, eventually taking over more and more of the hunting and trapping. Mary developed a gift for healing and helped care for sick animals and injured neighbors. John was their dreamer, always building fantastical structures out of wood and rope. Sarah, the youngest, had her mother's quiet strength and her father's love of the mountains. Fletcher built additions onto the cabin until it was nearly twice its original size, sprawling comfortably across the clearing. Emma cultivated a large garden that fed the family through summer and winter, and she taught her daughters to preserve food and manage a household. Together, they created a homestead that was productive and prosperous without losing its essential character as a refuge. Neighbors began to settle in the area, drawn by the same things that had drawn Fletcher years before. He helped them learn the land, shared resources during hard times, and became known as someone who could be trusted. Emma welcomed the other women, sharing recipes and advice and friendship. Slowly, a small community grew up in the mountains north of San Angelo, bound together by mutual respect and shared hardship. Emma sometimes thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Texas, bitter and cynical and convinced that the world held no goodness. She felt distant from that person now, as if those memories belonged to someone else. The woman she had become was confident and capable and genuinely happy, secure in the love of her family and the value of her own contributions. When Thomas was 17, he announced his intention to marry a girl from a neighboring homestead. Emma watched her eldest son stand tall and serious, explaining his plans and asking for his parents' blessing, and she saw Fletcher in every line of his face. He had learned from his father how to be a good man, how to treat others with respect and kindness, how to keep his promises. "You have my blessing," Fletcher said, his voice thick with emotion. "But remember, son, marriage is work. It is choosing love every day, even on the hard days. It is treating your partner with honor and listening to them and supporting their dreams just as much as your own." "I know, Pa. You taught me that." Thomas glanced at Emma with a soft smile. "Both of you taught me that, by the way you love each other." After Thomas left, Emma turned to Fletcher with tears in her eyes. "We did something right, did we not? We raised good children." "We did." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, and Emma marveled that even after all these years, his embrace still felt like the safest place in the world. "They are good because they learned from the best mother they could have asked for. They learned from you, too. You showed them every day what it means to be kind and honest and hard-working. We showed them together." Fletcher kissed the top of her head. "Everything good in our lives. We built together, Emma. Mary married at 19, John at 21. Sarah chose to stay at home, helping her aging parents manage the homestead and caring for the community as its unofficial healer. She was content in her independence, declaring that she had seen enough of marriage to know it was not for everyone, and Fletcher and Emma respected her choice without question. As Emma entered her 50s, she found herself with more time to rest and reflect. The children who remained at home were capable of handling much of the daily work, and Fletcher had slowed down as well, spending more time on maintenance than on hunting and trapping. They were growing old together, just as they had dreamed on that night so many years ago. One evening, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Emma's hair was streaked with silver now, and Fletcher's beard had gone completely gray. His face was lined with years of sun and wind, and his hands were gnarled from decades of hard work. But when he looked at her, his blue eyes held the same warmth and love they had always held. "Do you remember the day we met?" Emma asked, her hand clasped in his. "Every detail." Fletcher's voice was soft with memory. "You looked so lost and so fierce at the same time, like you were daring the world to knock you down one more time just so you could prove you would get back up. I was terrified. I had nothing and nowhere to go. And then you appeared, this enormous mountain man offering to buy me supper, and I was certain you were going to be just like all the other men who had hurt me. But I was not." "No." Emma squeezed his hand. "You were nothing like them. You were good, Fletcher. Good in a way I had stopped believing existed." "You made me want to be good," Fletcher said. "You made me want to be worthy of your trust, and you taught me that I was capable of more than I thought, that I could build a family and a community and a legacy that mattered." "We taught each other," Emma corrected gently. "That's what love is it not? Two people helping each other become their best selves. That is exactly what it is." They watched the sun set over the mountains they had called home for so many years. From inside the cabin, they could hear Sarah humming as she prepared supper. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. The world spun on, indifferent to individual lives, but in this small clearing beside a creek in the mountains of Texas, two people had built something that mattered. "I would do it all again," Emma said suddenly. "Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt and fear. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." Fletcher turned to her, and despite the years and the gray hair and the weathered skin, Emma saw the same man who had offered her kindness when she had nothing, the same man who had kept every promise he ever made, the same man who had shown her goodness every single day. "I love you, Emma Larson," he said. "I loved you the day I married you, and I love you more now than I thought was possible. You are my heart and my home, and my reason for everything. I love you too, Fletcher, always and forever." They kissed as the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over them for decades. And in that moment, Emma felt complete contentment. She had lost her faith in goodness once, battered down by a cruel world. But Fletcher had shown her, day after day, year after year, that goodness was real, that love was real, that it was possible to build a life founded on kindness and respect and unwavering commitment. She had been the woman who lost her faith in goodness. He had been the mountain man who showed her goodness every single day. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of choosing love even when the world seemed determined to crush it. As they stood to go inside for supper, Emma took one last look at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. This land had been harsh and unforgiving when she first arrived, a wilderness that seemed to mirror the desolation in her heart. But over the years, she had learned to see its beauty. The strength of the rock, the persistence of the trees, the clarity of the creek that never stopped flowing. The mountains were hard but honest, Fletcher had said all those years ago. They did not lie or pretend to be something they were not, and neither had he. He had been exactly what he appeared to be from the very first moment, a good man who kept his word and treated others with respect. That goodness had saved her. It had healed her. It had given her a life beyond anything she had dared to hope for when she stepped off that stagecoach in San Angelo with $3 and a heart full of despair. Inside the cabin, Sarah had set the table and was ladling stew into bowls. She smiled when her parents entered, and Emma felt a rush of gratitude for this daughter who had chosen to stay and care for them as they aged. For Thomas and Mary and John, who visited regularly with their own children, filling the cabin with noise and laughter. For Fletcher, who still reached for her hand in the night and whispered that he loved her. For this life, built one day at a time on a foundation of mutual respect and unwavering kindness. After supper, Fletcher banked the fire while Emma prepared for bed. They moved through the familiar nighttime routine with the ease of long practice, comfortable in the rhythms they had established over decades together. When they finally lay down, Fletcher wrapped his arms around Emma and pulled her close, and she nestled against his broad chest with a sigh of contentment. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured into her hair. "How lucky I am. How grateful I am that I found the courage to trust you that first day. I am the lucky one. You took a chance on a rough mountain man with no social graces and turned him into something better. You were always good, Fletcher. I just gave you someone to share it with." He was quiet for a moment, his hand making slow circles on her back. "Do you think we made a difference? Beyond our own family, I mean. Do you think we left the world a little better than we found it?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I think we did. We raised children who know how to love and be loved. We built a homestead that will shelter future generations. We helped our neighbors and treated everyone with dignity. We showed each other every single day that goodness and kindness and faithfulness are real and valuable and worth striving for. Yes, Fletcher, I think we made a difference. Then I am content." Fletcher kissed her forehead gently. "Sleep well, my love." "You too." Emma closed her eyes and let herself drift toward sleep, secure in the warmth of Fletcher's embrace. She had traveled a long road from that desperate woman in mourning black to this place of peace and fulfillment. It had not been easy. There had been hardships and setbacks, difficult winters and lean years, the ordinary struggles that came with building a life in an unforgiving land. But through it all, Fletcher had been beside her, showing her goodness every single day, keeping his promises, loving her with a steadiness that never wavered. And Emma had learned to trust again, to love again, to believe that she deserved happiness and that the world, despite all its cruelty, still held pockets of grace and beauty for those brave enough to seek them out. The years continued to unfold, each season bringing its own challenges and rewards. Fletcher and Emma grew older together, their bodies slowing, but their love deepening with time. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own, the homestead expanding to accommodate new generations. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children gathered to celebrate, bringing food and music and laughter. Emma sat on the porch she had sat on countless times before, watching her family fill the clearing, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. All of this from Fletcher's simple offer of kindness 4 decades earlier. Fletcher found her there as the sun began to set, just as he had on their first evening alone together. He lowered himself into the chair beside her with a slight grunt, his joints protesting the movement, and reached for her hand. "Quite a crowd," he said with a smile. "Our legacy," Emma replied. "All these people exist because you offered to buy me supper one hot afternoon in San Angelo. Best investment I ever made." They sat together as the celebration continued around them, their children and grandchildren laughing and playing and simply enjoying each other's company. This was what they had built, not just a homestead or a family, but a foundation of love that would continue long after they were gone. "I used to think goodness was a myth," Emma said softly. "Something people talked about but no one actually practiced. I was so angry at the world for being cruel and indifferent. And now I know that goodness is a choice. It is not always easy and it is not automatic, but it is a choice you can make every single day. And you chose it, Fletcher. You chose to be good to me when you had no reason to. You chose to keep being good day after day, year after year. You showed me that goodness was real." Fletcher brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You were worth being good to, Emma. You were worth every bit of effort and care. You still are." As night fell and the stars emerged, the family began to disperse to their various sleeping arrangements. Some would stay at the homestead, others would return to their own homes in the morning. Emma and Fletcher said their good nights and retreated to their bedroom, the same room where they had first come together as husband and wife so many years before. They prepared for bed slowly, helping each other with buttons and laces that arthritic fingers struggled to manage. It was a tender ritual, born of necessity but infused with love. When they finally lay down together, Fletcher pulled Emma close, and she rested her head on his shoulder with a contented sigh. "I am so glad I met you," Emma whispered into the darkness. "I'm so glad I was brave enough to get on that mule and ride into the mountains with you." I am glad too. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma Larson. My greatest adventure and my sweetest reward. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done for 40 years. And in the morning, they woke to birdsong and sunlight and the sound of their family moving around the homestead, starting another day in the life they had built together. Fletcher made coffee while Emma started breakfast, and they moved around the kitchen in perfect synchronization, two people who had learned every detail of each other over decades of shared life. When they finally sat down to eat with their family, Emma looked around the table and felt her heart swell with love and pride. This was goodness. This was what happened when two people committed to treating each other with kindness and respect every single day. This was the legacy they would leave behind. As the months and years continued to pass, Fletcher and Emma gradually slowed down, their bodies finally demanding the rest they had earned. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the seasons change, reminiscing about their long life together. Sarah cared for them with patience and devotion, and their other children visited frequently, bringing news and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. One warm spring evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Fletcher turned to Emma with the same soft expression he had worn on their wedding day. "I need you to know something," he said quietly. "What is that?" "That every day with you has been a gift. That I have never once regretted marrying you or bringing you to this mountain. That you have made me happier than I ever thought possible." His voice grew husky with emotion. "That when my time comes, I will go, knowing that I lived a good life because I spent it loving you." Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I feel exactly the same way. You gave me everything, Fletcher, a home, a family, a reason to believe in goodness again. You were my salvation." "We saved each other," Fletcher corrected gently. "That is what love does. It saves us and transforms us and makes us better than we could ever be alone." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnesses to their long love story. The creek sang its endless song. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Emma leaned her head on Fletcher's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they watched the first stars emerge in the deepening blue of the sky. This moment, like so many before it, was simple and perfect and filled with quiet contentment. Years later, when Fletcher finally passed peacefully in his sleep, Emma grieved deeply, but without bitterness. He had lived a full life, rich with love and meaning. He had kept every promise he ever made. He had shown her goodness until his very last breath. She lived another 3 years after his death, surrounded by family, content in her memories. She spent her days in the cabin they had built together, rocking in the chair Fletcher had made with his own hands, watching the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. And when her time finally came, she went peacefully, a smile on her weathered face, secure in the knowledge that she had been deeply loved and had loved deeply in return. They buried her beside Fletcher on a hillside overlooking the homestead, under the shade of a massive oak tree. Their graves were marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their true legacy was not carved in stone. It lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the values they had instilled, in the example they had set. They had been two broken people who found each other and chose to build something beautiful. She had been the woman who lost her faith in goodness. He had been the mountain man who showed her goodness every single day. Together, they had created a love story that proved that kindness and commitment and unwavering faithfulness could transform lives and create lasting happiness. And, in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. The homestead continued for generations, passed down through the family, maintained and expanded by those who understood its value. The story of Fletcher and Emma became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of the desperate woman who stepped off a stagecoach with nothing, and the mountain man who offered her everything. Their descendants learned the lessons Fletcher and Emma had taught through their example. That goodness is a choice you make every day. That love is not a feeling, but an action, a daily commitment to treat another person with kindness and respect. That it is possible to overcome a painful past and build a beautiful future if you are brave enough to trust and vulnerable enough to love. The mountains remained, eternal and unchanging, holding the memory of two people who had lived and loved within their embrace. The creek still sang its endless song. The stars still emerged each night to watch over the land. And somewhere in the fabric of that place, in the very air and soil and stone, the love of Fletcher and Emma endured, a testament to the transformative power of choosing goodness every single day.